it twice.
Not live. No, still not live.
I know.
I have 11 seconds on the clock.
Wait to see if we show up. It says end broadcast. So
here we go.
Here it goes.
Yay!
Here's the notification.
There's my friends coming in. Hey, Scotty boy.
Hey. There we go. Greetings, everyone. Hi. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Andromeda 7, your celestial gateway and your channel for community support, help, friendship, knowledge, and for being of value to others. To turn that off. All right. Welcome back, and if you're new to the channel, we're glad to have you with us, and if you are returning, thanks a lot. We appreciate you. Well, as Lori always says, it's Friday night. You know it's time to feed your mind and grow your heart. Tonight's topic is, what does death to the ego really mean? Now, our producer and my ever-precious, beautiful co-host and partner, Lori, isn't feeling well tonight, so we'll truly miss her, but her energy presence is right here with each and every one of us. So please, let's just send her our best intentions for good health, happiness, comfort, and peace. And Sophia has offered to lead us in a group intent for our sister Lori.
Agreed. When any of us in the soul tribe, that have been here for a while or just been here for a minute, the intent to grow as a community is there. I can speak for myself. And when one of us is down, we all pull together to do what we can to lift that individual back up. And right now, I just want to send as much support and love to Lori so that she can feel better. That is my intent, and I hope that you all would just take a moment to send her some good energy so she can pull up, because I miss her.
I do too. Thank you very much, Sophia. Well, I tell you, Lori and I pulled together a great show for tonight, as evidenced in that show trailer video that she created earlier this week. And if you haven't seen it, you can always go back and play it. She did a great job of defining what the ego is and how it acts under certain circumstances. She's certainly puts her heart and soul into everything she creates, and doesn't she? And she's such a great optimizer with information, a tremendous spiritualist, and a terrific teacher. So we'll do the best we can, and we're going to do her proud in her absence.
That's right.
But before we dig too deeply into the topic tonight, let me just take a few minutes to greet everyone. And folks, Sophia has stepped up and offered to help co-host this tonight, to help me try to fill in, because wearing multiple hats is a little tricky. So she's going to say hello to the members in the chat room. She can read it far better than I can. And I just want to say thank you, Dalibor, Brian, and Sophia, for showing up tonight and doing
Pleasure to be here.
Doing this. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Sophia. Kick it off there in the chat room.
All right. In the Soul Tribe house, we have Lucky Stone. How's it going, brother? Good to see ya. Looks like Michael Musgrave and Griffey are in the house. Much love to you guys. Oh, boy, here's the Maverick. Lovely Scotty boy. Mr. Interesting Comments. I hope you're doing well, bub. Sweet Chloe. Hey, how's it going, girl? Good to see you always. Beloved Abstract. Hello. Let's see. Joe Sapien. That is the last show. You had some really excellent content. Great to see you, sir. Yeah. Let's see. Smoking and G. You're the best. Great to see you. Great. JB. Hey, that's one of my buddies. What's going on, brother? Thanks for stopping by. I love it. Let's see. I'm scrolling.
Starlight 7. Is that one of yours?
Possibly.
Yes.
I was. Who's that, GB?
She is from our group.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Hey,
if you want to ask me, I could have told you.
Awesome
Hi.
sauce.
I am brain farting right now.
Uh-oh. Let's see. I don't want to miss anybody. I'm
Yeah.
scanning. Melissa, she is one of our friends from the shop. Good to see you.
Sweet,
Thanks for
sweet.
joining us.
Great.
And I'm going to scroll back down to the bottom to make sure that everybody.
Sister Mary wins.
Yay, Mary wins. Hello. Hey, that's
Good to see
Jasmine. I
you.
know that beautiful face. Let's
Jasmine.
see. Yeah. She has a really nice profile pic. I think I have everybody that's here
it for
so
now.
far. Welcome.
Right. Well, we'll take a break. We'll take a break periodically and pick up new folks as they come in, and or you can just send them a message, say welcome, because while I'm doing this overview. Okay, so folks, for those of you just coming in, Lori's not with us tonight. She's feeling a little under the weather, so we just set an intent for her, and we're gonna move on here. Let's see. When I think of ego, I think of that song. You're so vain. Bet you think the song is about you, don't you? Know that song? Am I dating myself?
Well, usually I think of
Oh,
the ego
yes.
has landed. The ego has landed.
The ego, yeah. There you go.
Really good one.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you guys just a brief overview to get the ball rolling here, and then the panel is going to jump in for our usual panel discussion, and we'll try to keep it in organic flow to the extent possible. We might ask some questions here and there to not nudge everybody along. My question to Lori, now Lori and I share a lot. We're in contact every day. We talk about a lot of things. We share a lot, stories or experiences, and we also observe others around us, and we always learn something from that observation, not with judgment, but coming from a place of understanding. But it's oftentimes our own personal interactions with them and others that causes us to have these conversations. And one of the things about ego is, I was saying to her, why is it that so many people believe we should get rid of our ego and stomp it out as if it's some kind of a nefarious, unplanned for parasite of some kind in our human development, that it was implanted against our will and we never should have had it in the first place, yada, yada, yada. I'm sure you all have heard that. And I said, I think it's probably because people misconstrue the meaning of the text, the esoteric meaning of the term as it's used in modern society, parasite. They hear it from spiritual teachers who say, death to the ego. And this has led to a whole group of people that believe that enlightenment, spiritual enlightenment, means no ego. And this perspective regarding ego death, from what I have observed and felt within my own being at times, it can lead to a lack of self-awareness, which in modern psychology is considered to be like a self-disorder, we called it, where one experiences a minimal self. They minimize self, and it's described as a flame that enlightens its surroundings and thereby itself has no priorities, no sense of narrative, reflection, or identity. And instead, the individual experiences a stream of consciousness, but the self-consciousness or self-awareness is not thematic. And it leads to all kinds of serious problems and conditions because the self is so absent that it's not able to be the stable core anymore that we use to navigate our reality. There is something called ego death in psychology as well as New Age spiritualism. But the ego death that we talk about in psychology is a complete loss of your subjective self identity. And it's been described as a renunciation, a rejection, and ultimately the death of the need to hold on to a separate, self-centered existence. And I don't mean self-centered in a narcissistic way. It's just that being self-centered It goes out the window. So some patients will describe the experience as kissing death itself and coming close to death. And they say it allows one to accept their mortal limitations, thereby transcending the need to prop up the significance of the self. And this approach can create an existential angst, as one can begin to see an illusion behind the I. There is a perception that our choices do not matter, so what the hell, who cares? And that the world's pieces are held together by nothing more than conjunction, that life is just one damn thing after another. You see, to me, this reveals the limitations of living without the self. And the whole point of ascension is self-awareness. Is our life really that meaningless to some people? And can we honestly tell ourselves that none of this really matters? Things like love, justice, faith, hope. It seems to be a view that's authored by the absence of the self-ego, yet they call this type of ego death enlightenment. I just don't see it that way, and I don't think Lori does either. In our opinion, the self is a framework for which we find meaning, and it's the core that permits us to navigate through the swirl of life's experience and events in this Earth school. She was pointing that out in the video. All of us, we created the ego. The Earth school created humans in a divine way, and part of that creation involved giving us that ego, a divinely created ego, during our creation process. That's how we see it. Because all aspects of self are in the heavenly realms. We're all over the place in different planes of existence. And we created Earth, we co-created Earth, we co-created human beings in a divine blueprint. Okay? So we prefer describing enlightenment as seeing clearly. We are all enlightened in this sense, and enlightenment is not something you attain, but something that arises when you cut away certain aspects of your I self to ensure that it remains in balance and doesn't get out of control. And we're going to talk a bit about the traditional sense of id, ego, and superego and how that all works. So enlightenment is seeing things as they are without adding your own prejudices, thoughts, comparisons, and concepts. The ego is a source of such thoughts, and reducing the pull that it might have on you from time to time allows a much clearer head to see things clearly. And this is what we consider enlightened beings to understand. This is what we mean by ego death. It isn't that we should rid ourselves of ego completely and stomp it out like a parasite, but that we should be aware of its process and stop being captivated by it. Be playful with it even.
Exactly.
See it for what it is, a tool to organize your perceptions, a partner for your thoughts, working in synergy to a higher state of consciousness and awareness. And we realize that spirituality is a very personal experience, and both me and Lori have learned, believe you me, we have both learned the importance, value, and original intent of that ego. We understand it, that it keeps us centered and balanced, so we can make choices that serve our higher purpose. And we understand we need to recognize when it does not, and then we shift our responses to it and thoughts to keep it in check as best we can. Are we perfect? No. Do we fall into the traps of ego at times? Of course we do. We're humans too. But the enlightenment here is the awareness of what it truly is and seeing how it can be part of a mechanism that we use for our soul development. So, having said all that, I'm going to lay it out with the panel. How do you feel about that? And we'll start out with Dalibor. I'm going to pick on you. I'm going to go down and around.
Well, actually, okay, to start from a broad perspective, the word ego itself is the Latin word for I. And that is what the original intention was in naming that aspect of the soul or spirit or whatever you want to call it. It's an integral part. Exactly. The id, the ego, and the superego. The id is basically your subconscious mind. The ego is your conscious mind. The superego would be like the collective conscious or God consciousness that every single one of us has as a component of their spiritual self. And just like the physical body, you have different components of the body, different, almost you could regard them as machines inside the body that work autonomously, but you need every single one of them. And at the same time, the importance of any one of them shouldn't be either downplayed or overemphasized. You may not like the fact that you have a digestive system, which makes you have to eat, have to defecate, and you sometimes people might feel like, well, I could just get rid of it and just absorb all my nutrients from the air and not have to, that would be great. But then again, you would be depriving yourself of things like potentially enlightening experiences that you could get from ingesting various substances, like, I don't know, alcohol, vitamins, whatever the case may be. So it's very important. The key here is to seek balance of the ego and not to overemphasize your own role in whatever goes on around you, and also not to de-emphasize your own importance. No matter who you are, you can still affect the larger world around you. I mean, a really good example of that I came across this week is the story which I think a lot of you may be familiar with, that you should revisit, and that would be The Man Who Planted Trees. It's the true story of a man named Eleazar Bouffier, who single-handedly changed an entire landscape, an entire area of France that was a wasteland, just by planting trees every single day. He'd just walk around with an iron rod, put that rod in the ground, put an acorn in the ground, and do that 100 times every single day. And within one generation, that area had not only been transformed physically, but also psychically, in that the presence of all these trees provided shade, caused more rain to fall, caused the soil to become more productive, and made people generally in a better mood than they were before when it was just a wasteland. So, the importance of the ego should not be overemphasized or underestimated. That's my take on it.
Sophia, you want to jump in?
Yeah, we had a couple of people come in to chat. Since then, I wanted to say hi to Dolly. Love you, girl. And Elderberry is in here. And I think we have everybody. And I'll make note if anybody. Stop talking about chocolate. I can't eat on camera. It's rude. But love it.
All right, Brian, Grandpa Brian, what do you think about the ego? Parasite, friend, foe, partner? How do you view the ego?
The ego, I think, basically defines our individuality. If we didn't have an ego, we wouldn't be an individual. It's learning how to control that, not letting it control your life as much as you controlling your ego. Yeah, it's what makes us an individual.
Yeah, definitely.
Because everything you experience in the world is experienced through your ego, through your conscious mind. So even if you're, let's say, watching a video of something, it's your ego that's experiencing that, because you're there virtually. And when you're walking through a city, you're experiencing that directly onto your ego. So it's your interface with the outside world, and it's connected with your senses too.
Yeah, great. Sophia,
Yes.
what's your perspective on it? Do you agree with that?
Well, I wanted to follow up on a couple comments that I agreed with in chat because I'm on duty. And I'm
Awesome,
loving it.
thank you.
The one thing that just like totally jumped out at me in particular was beloved abstract. The ego dies every time we sleep. There's no ego in sleep. And I love that, because when you sleep and when you meditate, that's when you allow the unconscious to step forward. When you quiet the mind, when you quiet the I, which we all need it, to be healthy and balanced, and what they were talking about. But just to realize, like everything else in a balanced metaphysical life, in my experience, it's moderation. It just because you can doesn't mean you should. I mean, let me get my soapbox out. But anyway, I really like what Scotty Boy said. Ego is like yeast in the bread. A little bit, you're not very effective. You're not going to hold the attention in this particular plane. But too much of it, you got one messy oven. Okay. We're just going to leave that lay right there. So I love that illustration. It's an ingredient to a whole. And I believe that our culture has cultivated and allowed the ego to run rampant because they love dirty laundry. And what makes more dirty laundry than an unbalanced, inflated ego? That's just a recipe for, Jerry Springer, God rest his soul. I watched him on TV when I was a kid, but that's, in my opinion, what you see on those kind of shows are overinflated egos that have self-importance. You have to have balance or you become ineffective. But that's what I have for right now.
Well, I'm right there with Joe Sapiens. He says, in a way, I attacked my own ego without understanding it, without assimilating it, and without mastering it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the point tonight, is that, a lot of folks are just coming into all this and they're hearing various streams of information coming in by very well-intentioned people sharing their perspectives and views. And there's a huge shift right now in how people in spiritual communities are understanding ego. And so what they hear is a lot of this need to attack it, stomp it out, kick it out, as opposed to viewing it for it's in trying to understand it and how it's actually working, its internal processes. And so that just kind of backed up my opening there, Joe. I'm right there with you. Let's see. There was a comment. Go ahead, Dalbor.
I suppose, to illustrate the point, people who have too much ego, those are the megalomaniacs of this world. Those are the narcissists of this world, the psychopaths, the neurotic people. Whereas people who don't have enough ego, those are the pure conformists. Those are the people that you can put them, set them in a corner and he'll do pretty much nothing. He won't speak unless spoken to. He'll just imitate what everybody else is doing, have no personality of his own. And, and in general, people with an over or underinflated ego are not fun to hang out with. You want somebody with a balanced ego.
Yeah. Now, I always used to think that was just the end and all, that ego meant narcissist, or that ego meant, and so I got offended early on in spiritual communities when they said, "Oh, you're coming from ego," and I'm like, "Excuse me?
I hated that.
I'm the most humble person I know of. Mm-hmm. What do you mean ego? I'm the least egocentric person in the what?" Yeah. And so I would hear all this stuff, and I didn't understand what they were trying to tell me. And I came from the psychology perspective of this model you see up here behind me, of the id, the ego, and the superego from a psychological perspective. So I understood what ego was, but I always saw it as the megalomaniac version of it. And in fact, I used to think of it this way. You remember the little pizza noid? Domino's pizza noid?
Yes, Domino's.
The little red devil. So I have a little red devil. I think I've explained this once a long time ago, sitting on my right shoulder, telling me, I want, gimme, 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 gimme. And then I have my higher God conscious super ego over here, but I didn't know at the time that's what I recognized it as. I just saw it as a good angel and a devil. That's how I was looking at it. So I was looking at the super ego as an angel, and I was looking at the id as the greedy one that just wants to be filled with pleasure and sacrifice. But I saw myself as the ego self, keeping those two in check, not letting one have more guidance over me than the other. And depending on one's perspective, whatever culture they've grown up in or whatever community they're from, whatever they're used to is going to help condition to which degree they listen to one versus the other. So I knew that much from psychology, but now I understand what you all mean. But and that's why it totally blew me away when I heard the flip side of it from a lot of people in the community, not just our community, but I mean in general. Now I'm not picking on any one group in our community. I'm just saying that I hear it a lot on the spiritual channels. That all three, to me, it would mean all three is death to self. If you're talking about ego death, and they're talking about it being a parasite that doesn't belong in our spirit or soul. And I'm like, oh, no. Go ahead, Sophia.
I would like to mention what Mary Mansfield posted in chat at 9:24. That is a perfect illustration. It's like what Scotty Boy was saying before, but kind of an expanded version of that. Exactly, right there. I don't know, some people might not be familiar, but in the Midwest, there's sourdough starters. And you have to tend them. It's like the egg in health class, you know?
Okay.
But yeah, you have to feed it or it will get out of control. I love that visualization that she brought forward. Thank you, Marion. Welcome. I don't think I greeted you in chat. My bad.
Well, in the classical Freudian psychology perspective, that id, ego, and superego also corresponds to oral, anal, and genital. So, and when any of those become out of balance, like they use the term anal, if somebody's anal, well, that's ego. Everything has to be
Oh, yeah.
perfect. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
So the
Mm-hmm.
analogy does work.
I think Lori was sharing a video with me today, and if she was here, I think we contemplated on showing it. It was really simplistic, but it designed it so well. And what this man was saying in the video was that because of the shift in consciousness and because of the point we are at in our evolution in consciousness, we're getting ready to shift out of the descending and into the ascending um, realms, the earth itself, and so consciousness too is pulling on us to think of higher ways of getting out of matter. And there are so many other streams of such lower impulses and frequencies that the ego is no longer acting the way it was intended and designed to act, but it's
Yeah.
becoming more and more out of control in individuals who are
Hmm.
not aware and don't understand what's going on here. And so it's about lust, greed, and it showed that it's coming from the lower chakras. It's about sex. It's about greed, and it's about death to others. Fighting and
Hmm.
wanting to wipe others out. And so the ego has become way blown out of proportion in some people. And but in the spiritual community, we at least try to understand spiritual law. We try to understand universal law. We try to understand all of these aspects of self-development. So we've been through the dark night of the soul. We've been through a lot of cleansing, and so we have a better perspective on it. But we can sit back and observe and see what happens when these people's egos go totally ballistic.
Well, let's see. A lot of that is caused by our modern culture, and part of that is the technology. Because look at it this way: in ancient times, everybody played sports, everybody hunted, everybody danced, everybody went to war. When there were nowadays, you watch people dance, you watch people do a sport, you watch people
Hmm.
fight a war. Uh,
Yeah.
Vicariously experiencing it.
Vicariously. So, that's kind of
Mhm.
like a repression of the ego where you don't get to do all these things, but you're still experiencing them experientially, vicariously through the medium of whatever, television, the
Yep.
internet.
Agreed. Agreed.
Whew, I like this question here. Brian, I'm going to let you take a stab at it first, and then I'm going to let Sophia nail it. Brian, what do you think about this question that Melissa has here? My dad told me that I attract dark arts because of will, because of my free will. I assume that's what she's talking about.
Hmm.
Is that considered as death to ego?
No, because I think if you were to kill off your ego, you wouldn't have free will then because
Yeah,
of that conscious
great point.
thinking. So,
Hmm.
yeah, if you kill your ego, then yes, you will not have free will. But I don't think the free will, even if it's from the dark arts, cause the death of an ego
Hmm. Hmm.
The
because
question
you
is,
still
you have
have
to
free
use,
will.
sure, because you have to use the will to control that ego, to keep, because like we keep saying here, thoughts are things. You got to know how to control your thoughts when necessary.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
Yeah. What do you want around you? You
mhm,
know, in my opinion, in my experience, everything that who I interact with and what mark I leave on this world, what the higher source or universal intelligence can use, it will go with them, and whatever is not balanced stays here. Not that I would be fractured in any way, but I would prefer to contribute more to the collective intelligence versus not. So it is a conscious decision, expression of will to exercise that right that we have and privilege to have a human body on a human plane. I believe the ego is just an ingredient to a very complicated energy signature. But if you get too much
Hmm.
ego, it can ruin, like they said, the bread, or like Starlight 7 says, too much ego and you're a prisoner in your own ivory tower. You get to where nobody wants to be around
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
it's too much, or you don't
mhm.
want to be around anybody else sometimes if it's not enough, yeah, it's a delicate balance, and the fact that we're aware of it, and with natural law we learn how to synchronize with something greater than ourselves. I think,
Exactly.
yeah,
Hmm.
that's when the ego is tempered to the point where it's still effective, and useful, but not calling all the shots.
Right. Right. Right.
That's my. I'll be quiet now. Thanks for letting me share.
No, I mean that's in actually, I'd like to add on to her. See, that perspective of ego death being that you deliberately stomp out and try to destroy any, it's basically destroying aspect of self-awareness. That's when you become, with that approach to quote ego death, which is a different approach than what we're talking about here, keeping it under control and viewing it as a partnership and synergy. um, it's when we stomp out anything that makes us self-aware, that would help us become more self-aware, is when we're open and vulnerable to attracting the darker impulses. So
Yeah,
a lot of people who are immature, not fully developed, young adults who haven't been introduced to anything like this, might be pulled by their ego into these streams, and they get into all kinds of trouble. And I'm not just picking on teenagers, young adults, even grown adults who don't have any sense of self-awareness or any sense of the checks and balances in nature that you have been provided with within your soul being. It's part of our body, but it's also part of our soul being. And so, yes, we're more vulnerable and open to attack. But that's the kind of death that's an inversion of what's being taught. Now, what we're saying here tonight is that there's the opposite view of that, and that death to the ego is a terrible term. I wouldn't want to call it death. How about the control of
Attenuation
ego?
or attenuation of the ego.
Thank you.
Mm.
It's exercising your free will to make the choice as to what part of the ego message you're going to listen to at any given point in time, not necessarily death to the ego itself. And things are taken so quite literally these days too, so we got to be watch out for that too.
True.
Um,
I have something
Go
in
ahead.
chat that I would like to speak to quickly,
Yes, please.
because when I read it, it was very powerful, and I can speak to it. Dolly, down there at 9:34, when she posted, "How do you grow? Dot 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 when you're being pummeled?" coming from somebody that has taken my fair share. So when you are you have to, in my opinion, it is best and healthiest to grow. And if you're not in a healthy condition, your surroundings are not healthy and conducive to grow this way, you grow this way. So if you can't focus on your branches and your leaves and your flowers, you focus on your roots, because that weather will change. And when you are finally in a safe place to grow upward, you're going to have a root system that can withstand the storm. So no matter what is
Yeah,
going on,
I
grow.
like that.
Even
I
if
like
you
that.
have to focus on your roots, focus on hermetically, the roots are the earth energy, ancestors, you can. That's what I did. And when I was finally blessed with the life that I enjoy and appreciate now, that is why you guys see what you see, is because while I was in a toxic situation, I focused on natural law and my roots. And then that's why all this, holy cow, Sophia looks so different. Well, yeah, because I'm doing the work, man. Right
Yeah,
on.
See, yeah, adversity or being pummeled, adversity builds character, and character is an aspect
yeah.
of ego that we frequently ignore because
Right.
that's actually the only thing that'll build character is overcoming hardships, whether those are imaginary or real or whatever. Even
Hmm.
if you look at something as secular as, let's say, modern inventions, virtually all of those came from societies and countries that were highly warlike and unstable, like
Necessity.
the United
Yeah.
States, for example. Because look at it this way: what has Switzerland invented in the last 500 years? The cuckoo clock. You know,
Right.
not much.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I had a thought that popped in, and you know, sometimes I had to learn that ego was about things you wouldn't expect it to be about. For example, um, when I first started counseling some people at work on how to do like what we're doing here, get up in front of a camera and speak. I was a Dale Carnegie instructor and a Toastmaster, so I was training the people that worked in our company to get up and do this in front of clients to give presentations, and then they're nervous and freaking out and crying, and just the same thing actors will go through when they first start acting. But I never considered that to be ego. But if you sit back and you question, this is what I love about the ego, the not the id or the super ego, but the ego part of it is you can actually ask yourself leading questions. Why am I feeling this way? Why do I feel like why am I shaking and feeling like I'm going to throw up if I go out on the stage? Well, not normally people would say, well, that's fear. Well, yes, it is. That's anxiety. That's not feeling confidence in yourself. That's that little id dude sitting over here telling you all these things about yourself so that you work yourself up to a frenzy and don't want to get out there on the stage to experience that. You're
Sorry.
afraid of failing, right? You're
Yeah.
afraid of failing. So you have to if you could sit back and go, oh, it's because I feel, well, I shouldn't feel that way because I know my material. I'm an expert in my field. It's no different than sitting down in a living room full of people or a conference room and giving a presentation just because it's an auditorium. I can do this. I can do this because it need. So there's that super ego saying, you can do this. You can do this. And the ego says, yeah, but at least put something in your stomach first or settle down before you go out there so you don't heave.
Hmm.
That's the ego saying, yes, she's afraid. We understand that. Yes, she can overcome it. She's able to do that. She's empowered to do that. She knows her stuff. Give her time to breathe. And that's what we do now in relationships, or what I do in personal relationships with people. Instead of yelling and screaming and stomping, I've been getting much more better at it. I used to go off at my brother, something awful. And it's knowing that center, and that's the ego. Go ahead. I didn't mean to.
Well, yeah, the whole
Yeah.
thing. What's Sophia? Did you want to go?
No, I'll follow you. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, the whole thing with stage fright, yeah, that is an aspect of id, because that's like
Mm-hmm.
primal fear, and that stems
Mm-hmm.
from egoism, actually, because you're emphasizing your own self-importance, and you think that everybody is going to see you as critically as you see yourself.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Most people are
Yeah.
just in their own little world, and they're just
Yeah.
they're not going to be they're not going to be analyzing, oh, his pores are too big, or his
Or
hairline
her
is
her
receding,
hands are shaking too much. Or yeah.
or
Yeah.
hands are shaking, or something like that. You know, I've realized the fact that a lot of people have a problem with public speaking, but I, for some whatever odd reason, I never did. I mean, I was a college professor, I was a high school teacher of English, so you could say I was kind of thrust into that rather early.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. What's this with beloved abstract is saying? Ego can't find itself, so it subsides back into source.
That's a continuation of her previous comment. If you want to know what ego really is, just turn inside and
Oh,
look at it to see.
gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
when I saw that, I was like, well, it kind of comes to mind people that are comfortable in their own company,
Mm-hmm.
spending time by themselves. I would say they have a better chance of obtaining and maintaining a balanced approach because there's nothing haunting them. They don't need other people around them to remind them or distract them from something that might be out of balance. And like we said earlier, it's progress, not perfection. And the fact that most of us, if not all of us right here right now, are aware of the potential of ego, so we
Mm-hmm.
purposely make sure and keep ourselves in check so it doesn't render us useless to spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
hmm Sure. Yeah. The key here is to be just as comfortable by yourself as you are with other people,
Right.
or whether it's a small group or a big group, being comfortable in all situations.
Right.
Isn't that
Being
called being
authentic.
comfortable in your own skin? It's called right. Is be comfortable in your own skin is the saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Uh-huh. And not fussing too much about not I don't have the right not wearing the right clothes, or not the right whatever. Most people really don't
Mhm.
care about that. you know
Sister Mary wins.
Right.
Realizing everyone is doing life here, but I find that my higher self gives me the answer that's best for me. It took a long time and many experiences. Amen, sister. So,
yeah.
where does the higher self fit into this model? Okay, if the ego is split into three parts, the id, the ego, and the superego, who's your higher self in relation to the ego? If the ego is your mind and your self awareness, right? So, your higher self has been through this before in many
hmm
incarnations, right? But we come in here with amnesia, so we don't always know until we can start tapping into that higher aspect of self. So there's another layer of ego on top of this, folks.
The
It's some
super.
of the karma. Go ahead, Sophia. Take it
Yeah.
away,
Well, I
please.
mean, I think a part of, for me, part of working with energy and being part of the solution and being balanced is keeping that connection open to source. And the only way that I have found to do it and keep it open and keep it healthy is to keep the ego quiet. The ego, in my opinion, can be a type of an anchor, kind of like the sun in astrology. But it can't be all about the sun because it's just like a car, there's more than just the engine.
hmm
If you have a chassis and an engine, you're not going anywhere, you know? But
Hey, but
anyway.
my super ego is sitting on my shoulder right now going, wait a minute, lady. I represent the higher aspect or the higher mind of the ego concept. So, what does your higher self have over me?
Well,
That's ego.
you
Meditation
could,
is so important.
you could invert the ego, say, but if you rearrange the letters in ego, it's geo. right? And what's geo? Geo, that's the whole planet. So if you start extrapolating your actions to like a planetary level, like in the sense of if everybody was X like me, uh, would the world be a better place or would it not be a better place? And that's one of the ways
Right.
that you can come to an objective judgment as to whether or not your course of action or way of thinking is beneficial for you or not. Because
Hmm.
ultimately, what benefits other people is indirectly going to benefit yourself as well, and vice
That's
versa. Because,
true.
like, let's say your goal is to, advance knowledge. Well, first of all, you got to make yourself knowledgeable before you can teach others, right?
Right? Truth. Yep.
I really want to. That's so true, and I do really want to answer this question by JB. I've never associated my higher self with ego. Is it a part of ego? I think I opened up a can of worms. There go my ego.
Yeah.
Lego
But
my
go
ego.
ahead. Go
Let go of
ahead.
my ego.
Brian, you want to take that? What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think ego is a part of your higher self because your higher self is there for your highest and best interest, where your ego may not be there for your highest and best interests. So
Uh huh.
there, I think there's a different. I don't think it's attached to your higher self.
Now, do you think that we were originally designed with an ego that was there to try to help serve our best interests through a partnership? It was there to help us learn our lessons, fail, succeed, whatever, but it was kind of like a self check. But it's still not the same thing as the higher self. How would you define the difference between the two, Sophia?
I think ego is the accumulation of experiences with this particular earth walk. I believe the super ego, at least right now in my part of this walk, is the collective of all experiences that
Hmm.
add to why we even incarnate in the first place. But I think the ego is what specifically learned, obtained, and applied in this particular walk. The super is exactly what it says, super. And while I have the talking stick, we
Uh-huh.
have say hi to Pa Joe, and Max Vision rolled in here while we were
Hey, Max.
So
chatting. Yeah, yeah, I had to throw that out there. And
Welcome, you
Regine
guys.
Huddleston, hey, what's up, girl? Nice.
Richie.
We got quite the crew going on here.
Yeah, thank you,
Um,
Sophia.
you're welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah, so it almost sounds like, see, the higher self is all aspects of you that have incarnated throughout all of your lifetimes. And they've all coalesced and come together. And it's the best version of you that's ever been until now, where you're working on this version, which will hopefully culminate in the best version of you moving forward if you choose to incarnate in other places.
and objectively speaking, we are living at the best possible time we could possibly be living, regardless of
Yes.
how you may criticize it or look at it,
Yep.
because you wouldn't want to go back even 10 years or 20 years into the past, much less 200 years into the past. I mean,
No.
just the fact that they had no TV back then, would be a big minus for a lot of people. Um, uh, the fact that most people didn't even have a flushing toilet in their home 200 years ago
Tell it,
itself would have been
Delaware.
a no-brainer. So, just like Steven Pinker says, we're living at the best possible time we could possibly
Right?
be. And we are the culmination of all those previous
Yep.
incarnations that you guys pointed out.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
Instant hot water. I mean, come on. This
yes.
is, I mean, dental work. Come
Mhm.
on. Yeah, I'm
Instant
sorry.
information. You remember some stupid jingle from 50 years ago, and you look it up, and somebody's got it.
Yep.
It's all there.
I think this is a beautiful way of putting it, Pajo.
What do you
I
say?
have found some lead me to my ego. Before I know what I'm doing, it's part of protecting my ignorance of a situation, but I find it's part of the refinement I need. There you go. There's the synergy we're talking about.
That speaks to what Starlight 7 was saying earlier, is you can
Mm-hmm.
use it to protect you
Mm-hmm.
because you're
Hmm.
using what you've learned. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a
So now
good
why would you want
Yeah.
to
conversation.
stomp something like that out? Why would you want to kill that? That's not the
Exactly.
ego death we're talking
Yeah,
about.
because it's there to defend you, and in so
Right.
doing, defend everybody else. Because look at it this way: one way that I've, at least in my professional life, where I've been an entrepreneur for most of my professional life, the one defining characteristic of a true idiot, who might not come across as being stupid or anything, but a true idiot will usually be destructive to not only himself but everybody around him.
Or
That
blissfully happy. Sorry.
no, not blissfully happy,
I
but
know.
just
Ignorant.
destructive of everything around that person.
Yeah.
That's the hallmark of a true idiot.
Yeah.
Well, this is an interesting way to look at it, Joe. If God sources everything, ego is a specific one thing.
He does have
Yeah,
some thought provoking.
Yeah, he
You,
does.
Joe,
yeah,
That's
yeah.
putting up with the
interesting.
fan club.
It's an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah,
Uh huh. Uh huh. Well, it kind of backs up what Sophia was saying about
Yeah.
being the
it's
present.
just like
The present.
you
It's the
know
present.
the
Yeah.
alphabet. And you're one letter in that alphabet, but you don't have an alphabet without that one letter.
Fair. Dig. I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Get it,
Yep.
Delaware. Uh huh. See, I love these conversations because it
Oh,
gets
this is
people
another
thinking.
one. This is
What?
another one. My wife and I were talking. This is Pajo again. My wife and I were talking that at our age, we see the changes in the paradigm. It's not easy to adjust, but my ego says, "Don't give up."
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
Exactly. You got to keep
Yep.
on
Oh,
adjusting, keep on
keep up.
evolving, keep on adjusting. I always bring up
Keep on moving.
my grandma. She's 100 years old, but she's kept up with the times. She does
Nice.
internet banking. She chats over Skype. She watches YouTube videos, constantly looking up stuff. It does everything online nowadays. And so, in other words, for her, like her physical disadvantages, like the fact that she can't walk that fast, or has trouble using her hands, that's not a factor anymore.
Mm-mm.
Now, here you go. Creation rises with ego. It can only rise with ego because ego is the observer.
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
Hmm.
I'm a
Yep.
fan.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only the observer, it's the consultant. It's like a knock knock knock. Sometimes it's a
It,
and
Oh,
then
it's
you
a
yeah.
go to
positive
your higher
though.
self and you go, "What the hell just happened? Why did my ego just slap my ass?"
Well,
Right?
sometimes they say that the superego would be the equivalent of your conscience, not consciousness, but conscience,
Yeah,
that
your
tells you
conscience. Yeah.
right from wrong.
Yeah.
And most people do have a very highly developed conscience, and they don't necessarily need things like a religion to guide that
True.
conscience, because instinctively we all know evil when we see it. You just can't describe it, and
You feel
for
it.
all, yeah, you feel it. It's just like you can't describe, I don't know, jazz music. You'd have to make somebody listen to it, and okay, that's jazz. Bad
Right.
analogy, I know.
Okay, let's take a look at this one, y'all. If there's multiple timelines, what's ego?
The now.
Right now.
Yes.
Whatever timeline you're in right
Yep.
now is the
Hmm.
ego. Now,
Yep.
if I go to another timeline, you all, does the ego follow me, or do I have a different ego? If I'm a different character in a different avatar and I'm there to with an agreement to experience different things, am I given a new ego, or is it part of my soul?
It could be either or, because let's say you reincarnate, and you planned it that way. That ties in with not only timelines but also issues of things like morality. Because the other day I had a conversation about this incident that happened about 20 years ago, when I discovered the location of a buried treasure. Okay, and this was in my hometown back in Czech Republic. I found the exact coordinates. Not only that, but had it corroborated by a different remote viewer. Those exact coordinates.
Nice.
Yeah, using
Right
map
on.
dowsing and everything.
Uh huh.
And the big question was like, should I go and dig it up? Should we go and dig this up? And So I asked my cards, like, should I go and dig this up? And the response literally was, yes, if. Okay, yes, if. If what? Basically, if you can. So when we got there to this location with our, pickaxes, shovels, the whole 9 yards, all of a sudden, one of our party got the most intense infection in her eyes that you've
Ooh.
ever seen, completely red, like in an instant.
Uh,
And we were like, oh my God,
Wow.
oh my God. For 3 months, she couldn't get rid of that infection. It was super painful. So I took that as a sign that it meant, yes, you can take it if you can actually get past this curse. Now, why would there be a curse on this treasure? Because in years past, there were no such things as, mutual funds or banks or whatever that you could put the money in, much less where you could pick it up in a different lifetime after you reincarnate.
yeah,
Now, I also did some more deep diving into like the origin of this treasure. Apparently, it had been stolen from a traveler by somebody who planned on picking it up at a later date in a different body in a different incarnation. And because his will was stronger than mine, I couldn't go past that. In other
yeah,
words,
yeah.
his ego was strong enough to do what he did and still defend that in the afterlife.
That's
That's power.
that,
Interesting.
Wow.
that that's interesting.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Well, then, but the soul retains the memories of what he accomplished and the experiences and the knowledge. So,
Yeah, but
okay,
not
here's
necessarily the ego in the present.
right now, Max. Okay, this is related. Believe it or not. What about everything comes from source? What about that? Now,
Of
what
course.
Dalibor was just saying, and what the video Lori showed me today. This man was a cartoonist, and he was drawing the arch to represent the surface of the earth. Here's the earth, and
Hmm.
here's the plants, and here's the animals, and here's the human. And he drew the spirit first, and he said, "Our spirit has come to earth," and he draws the outline of a person, and he has little rays coming off of it. That's the spirit. He says, "But to stay grounded here, we need that suit, that pressure suit." So he draws an outline around it, a thicker outline around it, and it's a pressure suit. He says you could think of it as an astronaut, or maybe it's a deep sea diver. The old helmet, with the suit and the
Hmm.
pressure suit, and
Hmm.
the tether or the cord is the light beams of consciousness coming down from the heavenly realms into the spirit, and that's how the spirit stays in contact with the higher realms. But the suit is the pressure suit that keeps you grounded to the earth. He says, now there's one more thing that the pressure suit has, and it's not in the spirit, and it's not in the suit itself. It's like you'll see these pressure suits, like astronauts have it, and so do deep sea divers. This little flashlight, these little lights, the red
Hmm.
flashing lights
Hmm.
that help you see things. That is the ego attached to the suit to help you do all these things we've been talking about tonight. So, when you shed your body, which is the suit, there goes the little light system. And what you're left with is the spirit that's going to ascend. Now, if that spirit chooses to reincarnate for other lessons or maybe to come back and help humanity, it comes back, it gets a different suit. So the ego wouldn't be the same,
Right.
but the soul remembers
Hmm.
everything you experienced, whether good or bad, every lesson you ever
Hmm.
learned, and has that in the Akashic records. And somehow, this little device called the ego is connected to that record. It communicates with the soul to get what it helped shed the light on things that, hey, don't things just pop in and you don't know why you know it?
Hmm. Sure.
Or you're going through a lesson and you're halfway through it and you're like, oh, I know what's going on. How do I know this? Or I'm using these crystals to do this. How did I just know to use those crystals to do that?
Right.
If you didn't have the ego, where's that communication with the soul? So it has something to do with that connection. Go ahead, Sophia.
What I was just shown mentally is that the ego is the director of this play. This play being this particular Earth walk.
Right?
And the lessons that we learn on each individual earth walk collect into what, if I remember my coursework correctly, it's like soul seeds. So it's like when you have a past life as a medium, there's a better chance of you having another life as it, so you can further develop that soul seed. And that's why certain kind of divination came easier, because a similar director of a similar play, there's a similar ego. I don't know. It was just kind of weird how spirit interjected, because I'm trying really hard to pay attention, and sometimes squirrel ball shiny. So,
Well,
yeah,
Because you're doing
it's
fine.
put that in there.
just like you and your presence on the internet. You get on the internet only through a computer, right? But what
Uh-huh.
if your computer craps out and you buy a different computer?
Oh, I love
Well,
your brain.
you can still sign into your internet banking because you remember the passwords. Your username is still going to be the same. Ever since I got on the internet, I've switched out at least 10 different computers, and just that's the same thing, the same analogy of the ego to the body.
Hmm.
you know
Yep. Well,
See,
we
while
have it's
your computer does have a memory of like sites that you visited,
sure. Yeah.
through cookies and all that, but it's about you. It's about your presence on the internet. Nobody can see what my machine looks like. They can't.
True. True. True.
Love how
All
your
right, look,
brain
it's
works.
10:02, and I just wanted to take a couple minutes. There's a couple discussion points here that helps drive the point home about the type of ego death we're talking about. Even though we've all agreed that term is probably not the best term, because it gets
Like
Mhm.
confused with
subdue.
other, huh?
When you subdue the ego
Subduing
doesn't
the ego.
die, but
Right. Right.
when it's in control and healthy, when it's
Mhm.
tempered.
What is the term that you used, Dalibor, earlier for it? Uh,
The What do you mean?
the,
The
the
ego means
stabilite.
self.
No, no,
The
no. The process of not not the death word, a different word.
attenuation.
Attenuation. Okay, so the
Mhm.
attenuation process is what we're talking about, and these are the stages that you might go through. So,
Mhm.
Grandpa Brian, yeah, I know you've talked to people about this before. The spiritual awakening. The first stage of this process is the initial moment of awakening in which you wake up from the ego's power over you. So that's your first step. You wake up, you realize it. Um, so the second one that you go through is dark night of the soul. As you navigate your newfound understandings and you begin to question everything, and you suddenly realize things are not as what they seem or we've been taught, this can feel like a complete loss of identity. The space in between can feel like a death, and it is energetically. And that's what happened to me in my experience when I faced one of the most difficult things I ever had to face, which was a certain truth about something. And my ego was giving me all kinds of reasons to want to get revenge, satisfaction, justice, all those little things that the id sits there and says, I want, I want, I want, I want, I want, I want.
Well,
And
like John
um,
from Max Vision said, the first thing the ego has is desire.
yes, it's a very
It's
strong
a
desire.
desire.
And sometimes it's not always a desire to do things of a higher purpose or a greater need. I was able to
Hmm.
see that aspect of myself, that darkness, and I had to go through that in order to identify what that was. Go ahead, Sophia.
Did you see what Lucky Stone posted in chat?
I
It
can't see it with the notes on
10
top of it, so you can tell me.
It's 10:04. He says, "You don't fight the ego. The ego is like a dog. Well trained is an asset. An untrained ego is a menace." Dang it!
Yes.
Hang on, it
Yeah.
just bounced up. Sorry, Lucky.
Oh,
Oh,
cool.
an untrained ego is a menace where everyone gets hurt. That is one of the best illustrations. There's been some really good ones tonight, but
You
yeah,
sure have.
it can be your best friend. Like um, there was someone that said, befriend your ego, and it falls into the Oracle of Delphi. Know thyself.
Mm-hmm.
The
Hmm.
ego is self.
Hmm.
So if you get to know it and befriend it, find its strengths, find its
Mm-hmm.
challenges,
Mm-hmm.
and execute. Don't be a bench warmer. Come on.
Well, see, yeah, getting back to that whole desire. I mean, in Buddhism, the key to happiness is to eliminate desire. Well, how
Mm,
do you eliminate all desires? Well, one way is by satisfying them all. The other way is by realizing the futility of some of these desires. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
when you
Mm-hmm.
realize when you come to the point, and I've come to this point on many occasions where I realize I don't really have any desires. And then look back and I think to myself, is that necessarily a good thing?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
but you're aware
Like
of it. Love that.
Yeah.
there was this young fella who was on a couple of days ago talking about taming the beast of the ego, or spiritual warfare in the ego. I'm like, oh, this is an interesting video. Spiritual warfare in the ego. Mm-hmm. And actually, by the time he got finished, I realized what he was saying, and that is that some of us think that, Grandpa Brian, we
Yeah,
lost
we
him. He'll
lost
be back.
him.
He'll be back.
Yeah, come back.
Hmm.
We tend to think of because the first part of the talk was about showing compassion to your for your own ego. The ego is going through what it's going through because I said the impulse on the planet has changed. We're going through that time, that cycle coming towards the end of a civilization.
Finally.
Things are heating up. Those lower impulses are smacking us. Transhumanism,
Gaslighting.
pandemics,
Gaslighting.
gaslighting, false information, fake
Mm.
news. We're just getting
Hmm.
bombarded with so much of that energy. And so the ego is really acting up. And so showing compassion and treating the ego as a partner, and finding out, hey, look, I recognize this is my ego. It's a lot of inner work. It's a lot of questioning. Like, why am I feeling? Why did that trigger me? What's really happening? And then going to your meditation, consulting with your guides or your higher self, looking for those answers. It's a lot of work. It's just like any relationship. Relationships aren't just self-propelled. You got to work at them. And so
Hmm.
is your relationship with ego. Now, this thing here, who wants to fight it? Well, we can think of it this way. He went on to say that there are times when we have to approach ego like a warrior and kick its butt. And a
Well,
lot
or
of people don't.
like the Chinese saying goes, "He who overcomes others is strong, but he who overcomes himself is even stronger."
Is even
There it
stronger.
is.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you know this the expression of tough love.
Ugh.
Sometimes being a warrior and
Hmm.
fighting your ego is putting it in its place and being very firm, and sometimes in a very powerful way. You can't always be lovey-dovey with your ego, just like you can't always be lovey-dovey with everybody you come across, because they're going to come at you. You have to set those boundaries, and you have to make sure the ego knows its boundaries. You have to give that ego boundaries. But
Right.
it's
Hmm.
not in terms of fighting it to the death, or seeing it as an enemy or an adversary that needs to be wiped out. So that's what I was saying. Because Beloved Abstract is asking, who wants to fight ego if not ego itself? That you're absolutely right.
That's a
It's
good
that
point.
part of
Yeah.
the ego. That's a very good point, because you're battling within yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's that self battle that creates desire, and that desire can either come from a good place or a bad place. Because sometimes, let's say you're filled with, I don't know, anger, one of the seven deadly sins or whatever, then you're going to desire things that are destructive ultimately to other people, to yourself.
Or
It's
poor cognitive skills to where you
poor.
don't have the ability to self edify,
Yeah.
because no one's going to do it for us now unless you're blessed enough to be in a group like this. And I love the part about making friends with your ego, because it is important to
Yeah.
maintain a healthy walk, but
Hmm.
ignoring it or not standing up and breaking old patterns that no longer serve us. I love having this conversation. It's doing a
I
lot for
love
me.
this, Lucky. A long time ago, I adopted a problem dog. And after a year, someone asked if it was the same dog because he was perfect. I
Oh,
told them I used his problem I guess he turns them into assets. The ego
Yeah.
can be used for good.
Right.
Hmm.
Bingo,
Sure.
perfect point. I think that's a
Yep.
great point.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Let's see. Seeing if there's anything else in here. I don't want to miss anybody. These are just fantastic. I love what you people.
See,
If
because
Lori were here, she would say, "I
Yeah.
love what you people are
it's not
bringing
Yes,
to the
she
table."
necessarily
would.
even
Yes.
Yes,
about
she
it's
would.
not even about attenuating the ego in the case of that
Yeah.
dog, but just like directing it in the right direction. That's all.
Yes. Correct. Agreed. We have to be Ken somewhere along the line,
It's like
Delabore.
a
We're too
I know, right? So it's like a tree. You can make it grow this way, that way, like with
Yep.
bonsai trees. You know.
She
Yep.
just gave the inversion of it. Who wants to make friends with ego if not ego itself? Of course. That's
An even better point.
Fair.
yeah, yeah,
Fair.
Yeah.
Let's see.
yeah.
Man, there's some really good chat. You guys are
Yes,
awesome.
it's
I
been
love the
fantastic.
interaction.
It's been
Mhm.
absolutely
Great.
fantastic. Yeah,
Oh my
absolutely.
goodness. Lori's going to be so proud of us. We did it.
I hope she gets a chance to watch it when she's
She
feeling better.
She
Let's see.
Mhm.
So the next one is, let's see. I left off at Dark Night of the Soul. You get through that process. You see yourself face on. Your ego enables you to do that. Without that ego, you might not have that courage to step forward and face yourself and accept responsibility for what happened in your
True.
life. You know,
Mhm.
exploration and curiosity is the next one. In this stage, you begin to explore more and fill the void with things that are in line with your soul or higher self. It's important to note that although ego death, or we're talking about as ego remediation or whatever, seems like a killing of the ego, what actually happens is not a killing of the ego. It's a loss of being subjected to its power over you.
Mhm. That's
As
a
your
that's a
ego
good point.
starts to change or transform through your remediation process with it,
evolve.
Mhm.
evolve, not die off, evolve, you start to live from a place of more love and light. Right?
Right.
Mhm.
It's a
Lastly, the
process.
soul growth and enlightenment. As
Mhm.
the dust settles and you soften into your new way of being, you realize more about your true nature and live in a higher vibrational state. You have cleared many of your old patterns and are now embodying much more light in a simpler, more purified, divine you. Right? So we've already talked a little bit about, and it's already 10:14. We're doing good. It's okay. But what are some of the practices? Now we've mentioned meditation several times, going
Big
inside,
fan.
talking to yourself. What are some of the tools we can use? Did Brian come back? There he is.
He's in chat. Oh,
Brian,
wait, buddy.
Right.
I didn't see
Yeah.
you. know why? I had my notes
Mhm.
over your square. So
Oh,
you've
dang it.
probably been sitting in the waiting room. Yeah, I didn't see him to bring him in. I'm not Lori. I can't do what Lori
You're
does.
doing
Okay.
great.
Mhm.
It happens.
I love my Lori, and I can't wait till she comes back. No,
Oh,
so
good for
Grandpa Brian. Sorry about that, dude. I had the notes right over your little box under there. So, what was I going to ask? Where was I? Where did I leave off? I can't remember now.
About ways of like improving the ego.
Yes, how can you do this remediation or this
Well, that's all
this
right.
work to huh? Go ahead, Brian.
His delay.
Yeah, he has a delay, so we're going to give him a minute. What tools do you use, Brian, besides meditation to
Uh, I didn't hear the question. You keep cutting in and out. Would you repeat
Oh,
it,
I'm sorry.
please?
Yes, I'll try again. What kind of tools or practices, rituals, whatever, do you use to help you communicate with and or acknowledge and keep your ego in check?
Uh, through meditation, pendulum work, and
Mm-hmm.
grounding. Those are the three main
Grounding.
things I use to help keep my ego in check.
Okay.
If I may answer that, I think
Yeah.
for most
Yes, you
people,
may.
they prefer like a a bubble wrapped Amazon delivered thing, and that would be like psychedelics, I think, because what does that mean? That means the dark night of the soul. It's literally the bad trip. That'll put a lot of things in perspective for your ego. It'll put you in perspective of where your ego's places within your own makeup, within the makeup of society, the planet, the whole bit. The other way is the hero's journey, and you can also do that with psychedelics
Do that with the
and
tarot as well.
with the tarot as well. Yeah, the
Hmm.
hero's journey and the dark
Mm-hmm.
night of the soul. In other words, we're again at that point where we're talking about, conflict being a way to evolve.
Yep. Yep. Going deep inside and
Hmm. And whether
doing the
that
work.
conflict is imaginary or if it's virtual, on the web, or if it's physical, one-on-one, hand-to-hand combat, or whatever, it builds character and it makes you a better person, or in the end.
I kind of wonder if the process, if there isn't a tie in here. Lucky, forgive me, I'm going to do my best here. Lucky Stone had a process, well, a lot of people did, and it was something that everybody was trying, and I still do it. And Lucky, for a while there, was coming on with his daily affirmations or his weekend affirmations. And he was expressing, it's almost like a rant, but it's just an expression of all the things he listed that were positive things, like I will not allow negativity to enter my life. I will not allow myself to tell myself I cannot exceed. I will not allow myself. He would go on and on and on for like 10 or 15 minutes with everything you could possibly think of. And I don't want to use the word self programming because that's overused. He's conditioning, he's training parts of the, to me, this is what he was doing. And Lucky, I don't want to, you correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I was perceiving that, now the way I see it, is it's a way of conditioning that ego, is it not?
Yeah, there was a book written about it called Psycho Cybernetics. I forget what the
Oh, thank
author's
you,
name was.
Dalibor. Leave it to you to frickin' know that. Go, boy.
Of course,
Yeah.
love the brain.
Thank
Indeed.
you.
Ah,
I
Yep.
forget the
I
author,
love your
but
mind.
he was a plastic surgeon by profession, and
oh
he was
wow.
able to improve people's outcomes, sometimes without doing the surgery, by dissuading them from it, and instead having them do these mental exercises
Uh
where
huh.
they were able to overcome what they perceived to be like, a nose that's too big or wrinkles or
Cognitive
whatever.
skills. That's
Exactly,
right.
cognitive
Mm
skills.
hmm.
Hmm.
That's
Mm hmm.
right.
Now,
I
Mm
think that can
And it's
play
like,
into which way your ego development goes based on how you're using the cognitive skills, how you're navigating this world, and how
sure,
you're
sure.
responding to interactions that give us character, because I don't feel I need to have certain chemicals in my life because being very, very gifted, I feel that might
Hmm.
backfire on somebody like me, but experiencing things like being of service, when you're
Hmm.
in the field, when you have
Yeah.
people in your chair, that you have the privilege to interact with that person in a difficult time, that promotes gratefulness for me. And sometimes it takes
Yeah.
me back to a point in my life that wasn't very pretty, and it's like because of my choices, my cognitive skills, and how my ego has evolved and developed, because I made a
Hmm.
conscious decision not to let it drag me around, because it will. I think it
Mm hmm.
depends on where and how you received your programming. Was it good parenting, bad parenting, good TV, bad TV, good field trips, bad field trips? You
Sure.
know, it's what we do with the experience.
It's what you do. Exactly. That's why,
Mhm.
I don't necessarily knock people who are alcoholics, having been an alcoholic myself for like 40 years. Okay. And because,
Yeah.
I started out by using it for the purposes of enlightenment, but it got to the point where it was like the hero's journey, dark night of the soul every time. In other words, you weren't doing it for the fun of it. You were doing it for the pain of it. And, and believe me,
Wrong end of the spectrum.
it was it ultimately made me into who I am today because had I not done all that alcohol, I'd be some kind of a tin pot dictator today.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Hey, Podjo, every once in a while I see a deeper me, and it's not all rainbows and lollipops. I
Word.
hear you.
Tell
I
it,
hear you,
Sure,
Podjo.
bro. I hear
sure.
you. Hell yeah. And I'll
Yeah, you
tell you
Word.
gotta
something. You
you
learn
gotta
from
explore
that
the shadow
too.
self too. Yeah.
That's
Mm-hmm.
right. Don't run from it.
Yes,
Don't
indeed.
hide.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know what that is? That's stepping up, taking responsibility of acknowledging, accepting, eventually, first acknowledging and then accepting, hey, and learning the lesson from it and moving on. So it
Yep.
has the same effect as something that's opposite to that, but the outcome is pretty much the same. It's very
Hmm.
useful.
Yep.
Very useful.
Hmm.
Um, let's see. Uh, does not always work. I tell myself daily, all day long, pants are good, pants are worn at all.
Gaza's in the house. Hey,
Gaza!
bud.
Oh,
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh! Hey!
See, I'm doing my job. Points.
Hi, Gaza.
yeah, I see you.
Yes,
Yeah.
there are no wrong answers. Thank you, Bucky. Thank you. Let's see. Mother's Day, May 14th. Yes, everybody's saying Happy Mother's Day, by the way.
Yay.
Hmm.
It's
Indeed.
coming.
We
It's a
wouldn't
week
be here
away, right?
without them.
This
A
is
week
true.
away.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, it's 10:22. I hate to
Yep.
break up a good thing, but we need to start thinking about wrapping this down, winding this down.
It was so
Excuse
much
me.
fun.
I'm going to
I
choke.
miss Lori. I miss her
Mm-hmm.
so bad. We did good though,
Hmm.
guys. We did good.
I'm choking.
Don't do
Anybody,
that.
go ahead and do your closing remarks. I'm going to mute myself. Make your
Okay,
closing.
cool.
Yeah.
So while Teresa falls over, go ahead, Grandpa Brian. You got the biggest delay, brother. I'm the co-host. It's my show now. Go, Brian.
Always, always remember to control your ego and not let your ego control you. Keep that balance.
Mhm.
I love it. Agreed. Delabor, what you got, brother?
um, well, the ego, being an aspect of self, has everything of yourself in it, and that's either beautiful or ugly and a mixture of everything in between. Because if you analyze everything to its ultimate, you'll see beauty there. But also, if you analyze it from a different point of view, you'll see ugliness there too. The key is to, like Grandpa Brian said, be in charge of your ego. Don't let it control you. Don't let the book that I referenced before, Psycho-Cybernetics. It says you are not a computer, but aspects of your being act like a computer,
Right.
and they can be
Right.
Left brain. Mm-hmm.
programmed. And if you can
Nice,
program
Dalibor.
your ego to focus on the positive, focus on the higher vibrational aspects, on gratitude, things like that,
Yeah.
then your life will become better
Agreed.
Yeah.
automatically.
Yeah.
Amen to that.
Okay. My
I have
turn.
one. Oh, it's
I
your
get
turn? Go ahead.
well.
You do
I
you.
get Mark the Ark.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. He kind of popped in there at the end. Go ahead, Teresa. I
Welcome.
think I got everybody.
All right. Let's see. I wrote down a paragraph here. I tried to give it the spirit that Lori and I intended for the show.
Nice.
To transcend the mind, you need to cultivate a blending of discipline, patience, cunning, kindness, compassion, humor, and ruthlessness. You are the doctor that will cut out a lie or starve a story of faith, even when it's screaming. Simultaneously, you are the human you are saving from your old past patterns, beliefs, and stories. You are the healer that approaches painful emotional memories with empathy, gentleness, forgiveness, and compassion, and you won't believe a lie because that will infect the human you are saving.
Dig.
Boom.
That's a
Yeah.
hard act to follow. Thanks, Teresa. But this
Yeah.
is perfect. It's
Mhm.
perfect.
Oh, didn't you already go?
Yes, it
Didn't you
was.
go while I was over here
Ish.
choking?
No,
I'm
we
sorry.
started with, that's okay. We started with Brian and Delabore.
Well, you go ahead too. Yep.
Let me, so much has been said that rings true. For me, I don't want to repeat as much as possible. I would say remembering that the ego is an ingredient, an important one, but it's still an ingredient. In my opinion, the emotional body, the mind body, when it all works in harmony, when each aspect of ourselves honors and respects the other aspect of the self, great and wonderful things can do and will happen. And that's why I'm excited about some potential new information that might come to the tribe. But anyway,
Yeah.
I just
Well, yeah.
not giving the ego too much so where it gets dangerous with the dog and the trained dog, because that's exactly what it is in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Well,
protecting
you
the
got to
self.
allow yourself time to develop mastery,
True.
but you also want to make time to practice the skills that you need to gain your personal freedom,
Fair.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's
Exactly.
balanced. Balance.
Life
Yeah.
is a mix. Life is a mixture of sunshine and rain, teardrops and sunshine, pleasure and pain. But when you see it all as a gift from above, your soul will be blessed with equanimity and love.
Oh,
Love it.
that
Yay.
was awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Open
Thank
mic
you for
night.
bringing
Yeah,
that.
baby.
Mic
Love it.
drop, show is over. And with that, I want to give everybody my personal thanks and gratitude on behalf of Lori and myself, the panel. Thank you, Sophia, for stepping in as a co-host. You did a
Yay.
fantastic job.
Thanks.
And all of you for what you brought to the table, and so much information from the chat room tonight.
Love it.
Really counting on that and hoping that our folks would. So, folks, if you're just listening and haven't been watching the chat room, that's understandable. But some of these comments have been fantastic. So, if you get a chance when the show's up and running and recorded later, you can go back in and see what was going on in chat. So, thank you all very much. Thank you, moderators. Everybody, have a fantastic weekend. Stay tuned for our notices about next week. I'm not saying anything right now. We're working on something. It's going to be good. And I just hope everybody has a wonderful weekend and keep those egos in check.
Yep.
Much love and favor to everyone. Good night, everyone.
Bye,
We'll see you
guys.
later.
Love you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye.